They need help. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the witty and charming John Engler for leading the previous panel, and notwithstanding the excellence of that panel, this one's going to be better. No, more seriously, I think if there's one message that we've heard over the last couple of days, it's that SEAD is not exclusively the provenance of the classroom teacher, the school building administrator or leader, the school district, the school board, but it's the responsibility of the community as well. I thought yesterday, among the extraordinary comments we heard, at least that I heard, children want to be good, one teacher said. Sometimes they don't know how. We're here in part because we recognize that there's an old either-or that we still hear remnants of. Either we should teach kids skills or we should infuse their lives with supports and challenges and rigor and love. I think we heard definitively yesterday, it's not an either-or. There is no substitute both for teaching and instructing and supporting kids in the development of skills and also infusing the skills, the mentality, the child development framework into the life of the child. The newly minted honorary co-chair of the commission, Linda and I agreed last night, Governor, I hope you'll agree to name Dr. James P. Comer the honorary co-chair of this commission. He said yesterday, I thought, a very provocative insight. He was asked some years ago, after he'd given a talk about child development and teaching and learning by a questioner, what's the difference between teaching and learning and child development? And the answer was no difference. In that spirit, we're here because we have 4 professional child developmentalists. Maybe not teachers, maybe not traditionally defined experts in education, but people whose responsibility includes the development of children. We're here because we believe that as this district has tried to do under Karen Nemi, who's here, the CEO of Counsel, as one of many districts to try to infuse the social and emotional life of children into the entire ecosystem of the life of the child. We're here because we think the partners that schools have will be just as important to the outcomes for kids as the teachers or the educational professionals. So we have an extraordinary panel. To my left is Jillian Ahrens, the Vice President of the Cleveland Teachers Union. We've heard and learned a lot about the deep cooperation between the union and the district here. We'll hear more about that from Jillian. Shana Marbury is to her left, the General Counsel and Vice President for Strategic Initiatives at the Greater Cleveland Partnership, focused on employment, on business, on creating a context and culture where businesses want to thrive and where the support of the private sector around the needs of children are prioritized. To her left, Stephanie Wu from City Year, the Senior Vice President, Chief Program Design and Evaluation Officer. Many of you know City Year and its tilt or its pivot towards education as a critical focus of its work in recent years, and to the social emotional life of children as a critical focus of City Year nationwide. We saw the City Year young people this morning, so thank you, Stephanie, for welcoming us. And then Kasey Morgan, who's the director of the MyCom network. I looked it up last night, and I just want to introduce the panel by sharing a little bit of what I found on MyCom. MyCom is a digital community and real community, as I understand it, for Cleveland. When you go on here, if you're a kid, you get asked to create your network. And here's what your network offers you answers to. My free time, what can I do after school? My neighborhood, what are the services in my neighborhood? My future, what are my options after graduation? My support, who will help me in my future? My news, what's going on in my community? My inspiration, how can I be heard? If you think of those questions, these are the questions that our teachers are very much trying to figure out how to help kids answer so that, yes, they'll learn those skills and become productive wage earners, but also so that they'll become hopeful, happy, purposeful citizens. So we have an extraordinary panel here. I just want to let them introduce themselves without going on any further and ask them just to share the ways in which they see their lives, their roles, their their professional goals around the development of children.
Thank you, Tim, and it's an honor to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am a first grade teacher here in Cleveland. I teach at Memorial School, and I serve in a leadership role with the Cleveland Teachers Union. So I am an elected third vice president for K-8 schools. And the question I typically get asked is, why is the union so involved in this stuff? Typically, unions are bread and butter. They're about wages, healthcare, benefits, negotiating those types of things for their members. But we also look deeply into how our working conditions and learning conditions for our students are impacted. And there is no greater, in my opinion, there's no greater impact for how we teach and how our students learn than the ability of the SEL integration in our classrooms to impact that. So to me, that is a bread and butter. To me, that is what belongs in negotiated contracts. To me, this is impactful, not just for the 4,000 members the Cleveland Teachers Union serves, but for those 40,000 students we touch every day. The Cleveland Teachers Union is about 4,000 teachers, paraprofessionals, psychologists, guidance counselors. We have a great deal of the educators within the Cleveland system that we do represent, and we were brought to this work the day of the school shooting in 2007, and when the recommendations came out from the American Institute for Research, our union set the flag down and said, this is our work. We have to be involved in this. Because in order for it to reach the classrooms, in order for our kids to get the benefits of what these recommendations are, we must be partners. We have to have our voice at the table to say, what does this look like in a first grade classroom? What does this look like in a high school classroom? What does this look like in an art classroom? And so we started the process in 2008 in having these conversations of how to shift a school culture, how to shift a system, how to embed SEL within the fabric of Cleveland schools. So I see my role as that.
Great.
I'm Shana Marbury with the Greater Cleveland Partnership. GCP is our region's Chamber of Commerce. We have over 8,000 business and community organizations as members. In addition to being what I would call the traditional Chamber of Commerce, we also focus on economic development and the health and vitality of our region. So one of the reasons that GCP is involved in this work is because we do care about the development of our citizens. Students eventually become adults, and we have a great interest in partaking in activities that help them develop good decision-making skills, also exposing them to career and workforce readiness. Probably the best example, if I could give one example of the work that we do, is through a program called True to You. True to You is an 8th grade mentoring and career awareness initiative, and it's actually a collaboration between CMSD, MyCom, which Kasey will talk a bit about, the Greater Cleveland Partnership, and also Neighborhood Leadership Institute. And through this initiative, we actually pair mentors both from the business community and also the wider civic community with cohorts of students, about 10 to 14 8th graders, depending on the size of the class. So these folks, these business professionals and folks from the civic community get to bring in their real world experience and talk with students and going through a formal curriculum, helping them develop good decision-making skills, exposing them again to different jobs and careers that are available in the region, and just also helping them develop as citizens. So our work is primarily focused, again, on making sure that the students of today become productive members of the workforce and of the region, and successful members of the region of the future.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name's Stephanie Wu, and I work at City Year. I oversee the development of our school-based prevention and intervention services nationally. I'm here representing our local site, City Year Cleveland, today. We are currently in the search for an executive director, so Maybe if any of you are excited, any of you who are local who may know some folks, please come see me, or the head of our U.S. operations in the back there, Phil Robinson. City Year is a national youth service program, and several years ago we started to focus exclusively on education. The reason we made that shift is because since City Year's inception, for 30 years we've been focused on youth development and how to help young people become engaged and in their community and to participate civically. As part of that, we realized that the school and education space is an opportunity to bring those youth development strategies to create a learning environment that would develop the agency of our students by both helping them develop skills that are both social and emotional, but our young people can also help them tutor can also tutor them in their academic skills. So this combination of skill development plus helping them develop a narrative about themselves, a narrative in which they begin to understand, who do I want to become? Where do I belong? Do I matter? Do I know how to exert control over my environment? And do I know how to reach my goals? So there's a real vision there around how young people develop durable skills as well as an agency narrative for themselves that is rooted in the reality of meeting the challenges they face in schools. Our services hinge on the relationships that we provide in the schools in Cleveland. We send a team of 10 AmeriCorps members into a school. They're deployed across classrooms, and they serve hundreds of kids in that school, helping them develop the skills that I just talked about, as well as this agency narrative for themselves. We are focused on measuring attendance, behavior metrics, and course performance in math and English. And these are the metrics that we use to show ourselves whether or not the strategies that we're employing in the schools are working. Our core members who you met this morning bring a lot of energy into the classroom, but they're also trained in youth development strategies. They are modeling optimism, they're coaching the kids in their pro-social skills, as well as tutoring in academics. They're also there in the after-school hours and providing a lot of enrichment programs, and it's this holistic experience that we seek to provide for our students. So we're really about helping to create a great experience for kids of school.
Good morning. My name is Kasey Morgan, and I'm director and lead the work for MyCom. MyCom stands for My Community, My Commitment, and it is a network-based organization designed so that young people have no way in, no way out is what we say. And what that means is, no wrong way in, no wrong way out, meaning that in this network, young people who come to the door in various disciplines that we service can get access to the services in which they need to be successful adults. Our domains include youth engagement, out-of-school time, transitions, advocacy, neighborhood engagement, education, and youth employment. And by that meaning, those were the domains that we found really stretch across the broader needs of young people. And what we found is there's a lot of times a young person may come to an agency and they're interested in something that that organization may not offer. If you are within the MyCom network, we have you connected to those other agencies that young person does not need to say, you need to go here, they can help you. We are connected so that when they are there, they can leave. If they wanted to register for something that you do not offer, you have the capability to go into a system and do that for that young person. Because what we found is if a young person is turned away, a lot of time that rejection means they may not try again. So our goal is to make sure that there is no wrong way in. We currently are in 16 neighborhoods within the city of Cleveland, and we also service 6 neighborhoods that are within the suburbs. All of our networks function on the same disciplines, meaning that we do not say that this neighborhood only does employment or this neighborhood only does education. As a network, we function where we all provide the same services, we all have the same connections, and we all have the same information. One thing that we found in working with community agencies and nonprofits was that a lot of them were neighborhood funded specific, meaning that in my community, this is what I'm able to do. So what would happen would be, we wanted to make it be, well, if you're in this community and there's something that's not offered because of maybe there's a funding the way that the funding is structured, you can still make sure that young person is serviced because we connect you through the network. We also have lead agencies, meaning that the lead agencies are responsible for funding. And that means that we take away that whole, how does this money happen? The lead agencies control that dynamic, and they work directly with us so that if they say we have 37 seats, we can only fund 35. Throughout the network, we bring those lead agencies together to say, okay, well, in this neighborhood, we only have 28. So we can afford to give those 2 seats away because we're still within the same network. And by following that model, we are able to make sure that we don't have empty seats or that young people have access to services across the board. I think when we ask what is my vision for the work is that we work together to make sure that young people have the access, not just the resources. A lot of times they're given something that says this is what you can do or this is how you can do it. But access and being able to get in there and make it happen is what's critical. We found that we have a higher success rate with young people who know our strategy. We're in the process, this is our 10th year, we're going on year 10. And what we're doing is we're working with the neighborhoods to get what's called identifiers, where if you're in our network, you'll have some type of logo in your window, on your front door, so that a young person, if they move, our young people are transient. If they move from one neighborhood to another and they see that logo, they understand that the same services that I was receiving over here, the same types of program, it may not be the exact same program, but the same types of things that I'm interested in are going to be offered in this community. And it is our goal that we are able to partner with more neighborhoods as well. We've brought businesses to the table. We have our schools are engaged, and I found that we are really working to make sure cross-functionally and multidisciplinary, everyone is able to understand the same goals, same model, same network.
Wow. So there's so many dimensions to this, and I want to, right at the outset, say the sooner we get the full conversation going, and I want to especially ask Karen to help lead this because she is she is the country's youth development expert, and she's also ours. So the intersection of sectors, if you will, dimensions of a child's life is one of her many areas of expertise. I also want to, we got all these red jackets in the way back, like you're not supposed to participate, but if there's, I hate to say this, but if there's folks we really want to learn from, it's probably, in addition to the panel, it's probably you guys in the back as well. So put your phones away and get ready with questions because this mic moves and I can come back there if I have to. So let me just start out by asking this question. So yesterday we heard a lot about common language, or the absence of common language. We heard a lot about the professional language, social and emotional, character, values, PBI, and then you get into the practical language. You have second step, or you have paths, or you have PBIS, or you have this, and then you get into discipline language, and you have restorative justice and restorative practices, and then you get into mentoring language and supports and agency and some of the words you guys used. One of the challenges, I think Antoine brought this up and several others did as well, is, you know, can we develop a common language so that the child actually knows when he or she goes from home to school, from school to the Boys and Girls Club, from the Boys and Girls Clubs to their mentor at City Year, and then maybe as they get older to an internship at work or to other kind of dimension, that they actually hear and see reinforced the same values in a similar language. Is it possible for all of you four to use similar language? Not to mention, would it be possible for the schools, if they created, let's say, frameworks, to actually have each dimension of the child's life reinforced with the same words, not the same concepts, but the same words. Yeah.
One thing that I would like to say, I've worked with Jillian before, that we've started is in the Cleveland schools, I know they have the, is it called AAPs?
Yes.
The AAPs, which are the Academic Achievement Plans for the building. And what we've started doing is training the neighborhoods on the language that are in that plan, so that when they are trying to come and speak to a school about what services they offer, they're able to understand what is moving that building. And what we found is that, you know, you may say, okay, I have a program that helps self-esteem, and when you read deeper into the program, it's really a program that talks about attendance and making sure the child feels safe or making sure the child feels comfortable in the building. And so you look at the language that that school model has, that school plan has, and we're able to educate the agencies on understanding that, so that when they do approach the school, the same language that they're using in the after-school programs for the programs that they're doing is the same language that we're using in the Cleveland schools. And it was really, really good partnership that we had, because they shared that information with us so that we were able to do that. Now, we are in other suburbs and we're still working on that, but I definitely think that is a really good start, because now our community agencies are at least speaking the same language that they're hearing when they're in school as it relates to social emotional learning and different types of programs.
And I would just, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
I would echo that. For City Year, we do not promote a certain taxonomy when it comes to talking about developmental strategies. We train our core members in being developmentally sensitive and resilience informed, and to use those techniques, but we also tell all of our teams that they should use the language and be trained with the teachers at the school level, and that we should make sure that our own training that we may do with our members reflects what the district's framework is, and reflects the district's strategies.
So there's a couple of thoughts. It brings to mind, I actually had a parent come to me. So we teach first grade and we teach the kids how to turtle when they get upset, and they put their hands on their shoulders, and it's a breathing technique. And we were teaching the children how to do this to calm down. And a parent came up to me one day and said, we were out shopping and my daughter wanted to buy a coat or something that she could not get that day. And the daughter in the middle of the store went like this and started breathing and doing what we had taught her to do to calm down. But the mother thought she was being disrespectful. The mother thought, what are you doing? Like, she was really angry and upset at her child because we had missed the link to make sure the parent really understood that that self-calming strategy was really powerful and impactful for that child to be able to take this into their world, to say, I'm upset, how can I calm myself down in a way that is a correct self-management strategy? And it was an aha for me to be like, ooh, we needed some work there. But what I really wanted to say about your question is this, is that we have a gazillion words for everything, and I think that that's been a common theme through the work that is happening. But what I think you question and what Kasey mentioned is that core value and that core relationship that can be built in discussing it. I don't know that we're ever going to get to one language that the whole country is going to use. I don't know that that is possible. But what is the power behind that conversation between me and that mother, or that conversation between the community partners and the Cleveland schools, is that, number one, we're actually talking. We actually have that ability and that pathway to talk and to understand that we do have common visions, we do have common goals, we do have common values in what our kids need and in order to develop. And so I would hope that more time is spent on building those pathways than on picking the right word.
Okay, so let me play the devil's advocate, and so let me ask, if I can, are the City Year folks in the back, are they all trained in the Cleveland School District? Are you guys all Cleveland folks? Okay, so by a show of hands, how many of you have learned the turtle? Okay, so here's the question. I'm just going to be try to be provocative here. This child did what the child developmentalist would say, generalized. Took a skill in one context and used it in another, right? So learned something in a classroom and applied it in a real life situation. Enormously important, high functioning skill development. If the turtle, literally, I'm just use this example, if the turtle were taught or reinforced, or if there were a turtle poster in every community-based organization in Cleveland, when you walked in or when you went to the back or when you saw the gym or the locker room or the computer room, whatever it is, would we be better serving our kids if all the city year volunteers, I guess is the right language, or core members, actually had the rigorous training to learn Turtle and be able to apply it when they were working with their kids, if that's what's being, forget the country, just Cleveland.
Yep.
Is that an ideal or is that a misplaced goal?
I think that's crucial. I think those
See,
conversations
teachers, us educators all want our stuff taken.
right?
Yeah. Do you guys agree or not?
Anything that provides a consistent norms for the kids across settings, I think is helpful for them, because they're in such a chaotic environment in so many other ways. So yes.
Absolutely. I think that's one of our goals when we're talking simply about branding and putting the logo in the different buildings and making young people understand. We absolutely agree that that is critical, which is why we're trying to learn the language and teach them the language. So yes, so that they do understand what the turtle is, because just if that parent thought that, if you're working in an agency and you're talking to a young person and they just clam up and put their head down and start thinking, it could be. So definitely I think that is a critical piece in the work that we're going to do in our cross systems development.
So we're going to save 5 minutes at the end of our panel for Jillian to lead us in an exercise of turtle. So you're actually supposed to do it standing and then, without sitting in your chairs, where most of us will need a chair to do it. But anyway, we're going to ask you to train us before we're done.
You're going to love it.
I'll just encourage people to jump in whenever they're ready. I have my usual list of 30 questions. Let me ask one more, and then I'll come to Camille and then to the hand in the back. Accountability and measurement. I think, Stephanie, you mentioned we measure ourselves based on behavior metrics, academic scores, and attendance. How many of you would be willing to actually say that your institutions, whether it's teachers, professionals, volunteers, community, should be evaluated based on metrics suggesting things like school performance and school attendance? Is a community-based organization not doing its job if the attendance rates don't go up in school?
I would say this. I think it really depends on what the role of that community-based agency is. For example, we have some agencies who specifically focus on making sure that young people get to school. So if that is one of the things that they're focused on and it's not happening, then yes, definitely we would say, okay, that's something we need to work on. However, I also look at it to see what are some of the other bridges that were built in that agency. Have they opened doors for communication so that the schools or the families now feel a little safer going to the schools? Have they built relationships with that family so that now they can say, hey, we've been monitoring, you're not coming? I think we need to really look at what our initial goal is for each agency. I know one thing that I value, and I always tell them, I need to see how your relationships are going with these families and with these young people, because you're never going to move kid A to point B if the relationship isn't intact. And I think that's the main thing that we look for right away, is making sure when we're looking, because we don't measure all of the things that can be happening at an agency. If you're a community-based organization and your focus is youth employment, then we're going to look at that metric and say, are you meeting those goals? If you're talking about transitions from 8th grade to 9th grade, or middle school to high school, what are your goals for there? We know they can't meet everything, but we definitely make sure that you are working in that realm. But what I look for is definitely, what is the relationships that you've built with those young people, and are you seeing growth in any area of their lives, because you may not hit the nail on attendance, but you may have hit the nail on something else that you can definitely build upon to get to that next level.
So accountability and metrics is of utmost importance to the business community, but I would say that the Greater Cleveland Partnership as a chamber is a different kind of community organization. So I would hate to be evaluated on whether or not attendance is up because we're in the building or we're participating in a program that's in the building. However, I think what we can be evaluated on is the kind of relationships that we bring to the school and bring to the district. Are our members participating in activities like helping you bring industry standards into your curriculum, or developing internship programs or mentoring initiatives? So there are certain things we can be evaluated on, but it's a much more subtle touch from our perspective.
Okay, so I'm just going to just push one more time on this. We had the school board member here who said that when he talks to parents, what do they want? Graduation. They want their kids to walk across the stage. Governor Engler talked about kids walking across the stage and walking into jobs, right? Actually getting some kind of post-secondary training that actually creates income. If we can't, is there a community-based organization, a community-based support system? Is there a union member who can say they're being successful if the graduation rate doesn't go up? I mean, really?
I mean, as a community-based organization, that's the tension we feel, right? Is that we have to prove that we're being effective. So we have to say we move this needle in these ways, and we have our stakeholders. And sometimes those stakeholders are not, they're private individuals or they're corporations. But we have those goals and we're accountable to those stakeholders, but we also are very focused on delivering the goals that we co-construct with our district partners and our school partners. And we believe that if our schools aren't being successful, then our organization has more work to do, that we aren't being successful. So the accountability piece is this mix of accountability metrics, which are actually lag metrics, right? Because they're grades, they're attendance, but they're after the fact. What we as community-based organizations need to also have factored into our accountability is, are we meeting our leading indicators? So are we also, and those leading indicators have to do with providing key activities at a certain intensity to indicate that they work. So for example, we provide a lot of attendance supports and we provide prevention supports, but we also provide chronic absenteeism supports. So when it comes to chronic absenteeism, City Year wants to be held accountable to that attendance goal, but we also want our school partners to know that we have the number of times that we have found out root cause of a young person's inability to attend school, and that we've made the appropriate referral for that root cause, because sometimes it's not City Year that can actually address that. And this is to Kasey's point. Sometimes we have to refer that student to a social worker or to somebody else. But we should be recognized for actually having found the root cause and for making the referral somewhere in the system.
Fair enough.
So first, I would like to say graduation rates are up 17% and about to be 19% in Cleveland. And I really do believe the work we are doing is showing impact on our data metrics. It takes time. Senator Lehner said it this morning, like sometimes you're on like a cruise ship and we gotta correct it, and we've gotta keep moving that in the right direction. But if you look, our attendance rates are up. If you look at our CFL data, we are making huge strides. And those students entering high school now are the kids, we've been doing this for about 8-9 years. They are the kids who have had their entire career, the academic career embedded within these SEL functions, and it does take time. And the constant struggle sometimes is with giving classrooms the tools, the time, the training that they need in order to do this well, because we know it works. We know every kid in Cleveland needs these skills to be successful. So what's the best way to do it? We have high mobility rates in Cleveland, both with students, we have turnover with teachers, we have turnover with leaders. These are constant challenges. Given like a set standard that everything stays the same, it would still take time. But we're in a moving target here. We have a lot of things, and it's, trust me, that I'm not making an excuse, because we are doing the work and we will continue to do the work because our kids need it and our kids deserve it. But it's where how we evaluate success. We believe the SEL is already embedded in because how we know our students, how we move their instruction, how we can get them to their content standards. We also have the pressure of a standardized test state. Like, we have a lot of pressure on our teachers on getting test scores raised, and it's how do we get into those classrooms to get teachers to understand that SEL isn't instead of, it is how. It is the lifeboat for how to get there in the midst of the storm. It is how we find success. So getting teachers to buy in, getting teachers to take those tools and implement them well over time is how we raise those graduation rates and keep getting them to that success.
So if I could just jump in, I think the short answer to your question is no. If graduation rates don't go up in Cleveland, no community organization can say they're successful. But the flip side of that is no community organization is going to be successful on its own in raising graduation rates. We have to have a collaboration, a community collaboration in Cleveland. And I think we have that through the Cleveland Plan and different initiatives that we've all been working on together, you know, from our different sectors, but together. The community overall has to come together. It can't be one organization.
And I think one more thing, we were actually asked that question recently about graduation rates, because MyCom is not a program per se. They were like, well, how do you measure? So what we actually did was went back for 10 years of trend data, looking at where we first started with Cleveland, because that was our major, and looking at the trends. So we were able to show that we are trending up. But we can't say that it's because of MyCom that trend is happening. But we can say that once we started this partnership and bringing all these pieces and parts to get together, there was a trend going up. And we're also doing that in comparisons to some of our suburban districts as well. Are we going up? Are we staying the same? And I think when we are able to look at trends and see where we're going and where we started, then yes, we can say we're moving. But we definitely, I don't think it's fair to say this person moved it or this person, especially when you're working in a network model. I think it's all the pieces and parts.
So thank you. Good answers and really helpful, I think, perspective. I just want to kind of tease up that this collaborating district model that Cleveland's a part of, that Counsel launched 8 years ago, I just think there's probably so much to be learned if we could have the community-based partners of the district also in dialogue with your counterparts in Oakland, your counterparts in Austin, Atlanta, Chicago, and other places, DC maybe in the future. So we've kind of built a professional learning community for the educators, but maybe we haven't adequately, or maybe we haven't yet been able to integrate as much of the community-based partners in the professional learning community, so you could be both contributing to their learning, what you've done in the Cleveland partnership and so on. Anyway, let me stop there and let Camille jump in.
Thanks, Tim. And is that working? I wanted to just pick up on the question that you asked before around language. And I hate to go back to language, but I think it's really critical. And so how do you, each of you, describe the work that you do? Like, what is the goal of the work that you do, kind of succinctly, to get support from funders, from families? What's the end goal that you're selling? And what's the language you use to describe that?
So for us, it really comes down to building a strong talent pipeline. That's what employers care about. That's what companies care about. It's interesting, when I was approached to actually be a part of this panel, I never thought of our work as part of the social and emotional learning model. I think of our work as helping kids to develop skills that will make them a strong part of a productive workforce. And that's not to say we don't care about development of children, because the business community cares a lot about that, and the investments from different members show that they care a lot about that. But for us, the primary focus is making sure that children in the Cleveland region have the skills and the talents that they need to be a productive part of the workforce in the community going forward.
About the rest, others want to
Well, ours is
elevator speech?
Our elevator speech is that we want all the young people to be positive citizens and prepare for the 21st century and beyond, so to speak. And I think that's how we're able to definitely partner with the business community, because they're looking for young people who are going to be those adults in that talent pipeline. That's how we're able to successfully partner with the schools, because they're looking to make sure that they're educating the young people so that they're able to graduate and be within that productive society. And the same with our other partners. Our goal is, however it needs to happen through any of our disciplines, education, employment, advocacy, any of those, youth engagement, making sure that they're productive citizens and prepared to move forward and become productive adults in the 21st century. So I think because we are so broad, we are able to show how our language fits with all of our different partners, be it education, be it business, be it civic, because all of those have their own niche. But that is why we're a network that tries to make sure that a young person is getting the skills in all of those domains, so that they're able to fit in wherever they are trying to go when they do move out of our network in terms of age. But we go now from 8, we used to go to 18, now we go to 24. So because of that, we're finding, and that was why we found that at 18, some of the skills that were needed just were not there. So by continuing to partner with our agencies and with our businesses to get them the skills development, we are still working to move them toward being productive. And we're just making sure that that gap is filled, so that when they are productive, they're able to move on to Shana and get a job and go to college as with the graduates.
And
Stephanie,
ours-
can I ask one of the red jackets to answer the question for you?
Sure, sure, yeah, totally.
You guys hear the question? You want to repeat it? Camille?
Hi, I'm Christina Bowerman. I served at East Technical High School, and my students are now seniors at East Tech. So I would say City Year's work, our elevator speech, is to get students on track and on time to 10th grade so that they're able to graduate. We do that through working on our ABCs, which Stephanie talked about, our attendance, behavior, and coursework in math and English, in order to get our students there. But I think social emotional work is, you can't take that away from academic achievement, because I don't think you can have one without the other.
Pretty good. Pretty
My
good.
job, she can have my job.
Pretty good.
You're hired, Christina.
A plus. There was a question in the back, and then we'll move up to Jorge. Yeah, please.
Good morning. My name is Zareen Bailey, and I'm from the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, and I actually have a question for Kasey Morgan. Kasey, I know you're very passionate about young people, and often we design programs for youth that are for youth, about youth, but we don't often have opportunities to do youth voice or give young people a voice. Are there things embedded in the MyCom initiative that allow youth to have a voice about their network, or to have leadership opportunities, or are there plans in the future to make that happen?
Well, the interesting thing about our network is everything that we design, we have a youth, or we try to get at least 3 to 5 on our committees. That's from communications, how we send out our marketing materials, because just because they look cute to us, they may not be flashy for the young people. They are on every level. They meet as high as when we go to the Cleveland Foundation, who is one of our major funders. They're invited to those meetings. They're able to sit in on any type of meeting that we have planned. Actually, this Thursday, we restructured our youth engagement model. And this was something that we did in November. However, we are not launching it until we meet with them this Thursday at 3 o'clock, because we want to get approval from the young people who've been a part of this strategy to see, okay, we felt that it needed to develop into something else. This is what we're looking to do. Does it fit where your needs are? So the long and short answer is everything from designing of the materials to even picking out the lunch that we're going to have at an event, we make sure that there is a youth voice, because we recognize it is the work that we do is for them, so they need to be their own advocates.
Jorge, and then I see Karen's tent is up after.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So thank you for being here. I'm really encouraged by how consistent and aligned you are on language and the support for SEL and all of that. But I'm really curious about how you all interact, because you're sort of 4 components of probably several others. I mean, do you guys have meetings? Do you come together frequently? How do you sort of bring your respective capabilities and desires into sort of a common way of facilitating interaction? How do you interact?
That's a good question.
Did you all just meet here?
So I will say the Human Or Executive Committee, of which the Cleveland Teachers Union sits on, has to some degree what's called quality standards, and so there is some interaction with partners that come into the schools to talk and meet. It's probably an area we need to improve. It's probably an area, I know that the union has met with Greater Cleveland Partnership in many contexts. I'm not sure if it's been so much around the SEL work, but it's where partnerships, I believe, are important, and I think there is probably an opportunity to strengthen that.
What we do is, for example, we have a steering committee, and on our steering committee, we have a representative from the Cleveland schools. We also work with Shana on some of our larger initiatives, and she sits in on a lot of our meetings. And what we've developed is something that we call the CEO's Council. It does not have to be the actual CEO. It just needs to be their designee, so that when we are starting to move into year 10 and showing them all of the things that we want to do education, we want to make sure that that voice is there. Same thing with the Executive Directors Council. If you are a director or whoever your designee is and you are within a MyCom neighborhood, coming together to have that conversation. Will we probably get all of the different partners together? No. But if we can get the CEO feedback for education and then we get the director's feedback, when I'm able to bring all the people together, I can then transmit the information. But I think the best thing that we've been doing is definitely making sure that we have our steering committee has we have a faith-based representation. We have representation from everywhere, so that the work that we do, we're showing how it drives, and then we're able to take their feedback. And hopefully, like I said, as we launch these new initiatives, bringing larger bodies together of the directors and of the superintendents or CEOs, we're able to really bring those two worlds together. Because I think once we get that solidified, to answer your point, all of the pieces will have a stronger link for communication. Right now, we do it we pass the information.
Stephanie?
Sorry, so as I probably sort of expected, and as you've had to do, is have your own structures for facilitating dialogue and interaction. But that means that every organization has its own structure. If perhaps as we think about this, Tim, from a commission perspective, we can dialogue with you, because there may be a way of sort of having some structures that cut across all that, so that you do this much faster and much more efficiently, which I think is in the mutual interest of us all, right?
Is there anything like that in DC, Antoine? Do you have community-based partners? I mean, I know you've only been there a couple of weeks, but...
I would actually recommend that if we're looking at stronger models for community-based partners, we look more to Oakland, which has a stronger history there. DC does have them, but in terms of deeply embedded across the school district in an intentional way, we're not there yet. There are certain schools that are there, and there are partnerships in every school, but in an intentional focus in terms of aligning partners with the school leader in an intentional way to move the school forward, focusing on culture, climate, and academics. It's not as intentional as it will be.
Gotcha. Karen?
Good. I mean, one quick comment. I would second the recommendation that Oakland is sort of at the top of the pile in terms of thinking about these partnerships. And Jorge, to your point, one of the things that we've learned in communities is you have to create a partnership of the partners. I mean, the school system is complex enough that it's very easy for the system to have a lot of one-off partnerships and not know who all those partners are. But one of the things that lots of communities are doing around this issue and others is, in just sort of general, how do we make sure our young people are successful, is creating the infrastructure of the partners. But my question is, since Tim has said I'm the world's youth development expert, is to come back and pose this question to you from the perspective of young people, which we often don't do. So, wonderful set of community partners. I've heard a commitment to moving more people into the schools, a commitment to creating more places in the community where young people can go to get supports and services and opportunities. And all of that is really about creating more possibilities for success. And then obviously the discussion that we're having today is how we make sure that when we're talking about possibilities for success, we're being very explicit. Should I do something? We're being very explicit. I don't know what happened. Battery died. That we're being very explicit about talking about the power of these social and emotional skills, soft skills, work skills, 21st century skills, whatever we want to talk them. So if I'm a young person, let's say I'm an 8th grader, and I'm moving to Cleveland, where would I go to ask, or where would I go with my family to ask the question, how do I know that the places that I go, school or otherwise, the folks with the MyCom symbol or the folks in City Year, et cetera, or the folks who are coming in to do mentoring, how would I know that they understand what they should be doing with me in terms of relationships and creating environments to support, to make a place where these social and emotional skills are important? How would I know that I can expect them to actually name the skills and, if appropriate, train, sort of bring in teaching and training to help me build those skills? And then how would I know whether they are going to expect me to use the skills, whether they're going to acknowledge the skills once I use them and maybe even reward me for them? How would I know that? So would there be common answers across all of you? And I know we're not talking about language right now, I'm talking about intentionality. How do we get to a common intent that we could share with young people?
So I know we in Cleveland, we do have what's called like a parent university, as well as within each school. We've really tried to build out our communications pieces about the work we're doing, because it's one thing for those within the school to know it and do it, but it's another to make sure that those coming into our classrooms understand what we do with planning centers, how we interact with student support teams, what paths is, what second step is. And so we've had to build out, we have flyers, pamphlets, but then when a new family comes to a Cleveland school, our planning center instructional aide does do a intake. They do a welcome for that family to go through the school to make sure they have any questions answered, to explain the SEL initiatives that are going on. And that in an 8th grade classroom, for your example, so that student, I would expect to begin to have second step as a part of their normal day. So typically it's 15 to 20 minutes a day of SEL instruction. In addition, that connects, it is intentional, but it's also very much connected to their content. And then we have check-ins with their teachers, with potentially the planning center aide. And then we also have our data assessment tools that show that this stuff is important and that we want to know. Asking the child, do you feel challenged in your classroom? Asking the child, do you feel that you have someone in the building to go talk to if you are feeling afraid or alone or need someone to talk to? There are ways we are trying to bring that information to our families and make sure that they have those connections.
In the community, and you brought up something interesting that's going to make me rethink some things. We typically have, when a young person comes into any of our MyCom agencies or programs, we give them a list of, this is what MyCom is, this is what your advisor is supposed to be able to do, and this is what we're expecting them to have from you. So for example, they should be able to say on intentional speech, understanding how to communicate, whether or not, if it's a specific job organization is doing job skills, teaching them about the time management, cell phone use, all of the things that we found out are barriers. And then once they know what they're supposed to learn, we in turn have them say, okay, with these programs, when we do this, this is what's going to happen, this is what you're going to get, and this is how you're going to use it. But to your point, I have no idea how many young people they actually follow through with those steps, and that's just being as transparent as possible. Yes, we put that in place because if I'm in the 8th grade, I'm like, well, how do you know How do I know that you're supposed to be teaching me X, Y, and Z? So we do give them the speech, okay, when you come in and you're coming for this youth employment program, by the end of this, you should understand the importance of time management, being on time, dressing for success, not using your phone, all of the things that we want them to know. And through this person has been trained, and we're going to do activities on bam, bam, bam. But to your point, how do we know it's actually happening? That is something that I can't answer that and say that I know it is actually happening, but that's giving my brain a little turn, because yes, we put it in place, because you're right. We do need to ask those questions, because how do I know you're even the person that's supposed to teach me these things? But the follow-up is we need to make sure that it is happening on that grassroots ground level.
The way we manage intentionality is at a couple levels. One's at the building level and then one's at the district level. So at the district level, we're deployed to the most vulnerable schools, and with those schools, we are embedded into their corrective action plans. So it's really clear how our services are driving the strategies that the district wants to drive in those schools, and then that dictates how the principals present the city year team to their students when the school year starts. The other thing that happens at the building level is the red jackets are in schools grade 3 through 9, and we're in a feeder pattern. So the high schools that have the highest dropout rates, our core members are working in 3 of those high schools in the district here in Cleveland. And then we're also working in their feeder elementary and middle schools. So what happens is that the students get used to seeing the red jackets as they progress through school, and they start to associate. They know there are certain routines and protocols that people in red jackets will use with them as they go through school.
Dr. Comer?
Thank you very much. What do you think is the penetration of your work in the schools, and how are the students involved? How do they self-nominate? How do they get involved? And one other part of it, what about the students that are most challenging and the ones least likely to take the initiative? Is there anything in the school that could encourage them to participate?
So with True to You, our mentoring program is a 3-year ramp-up model. So we started last year with 1/3 of the CMSD 8th graders. And by next school year, we will be covering 100% of the 8th graders. So in the 8th grade level, they have no choice but to be involved in True to You and be involved in the mentoring process. So there's nothing for them to really select or opt into. I think the question in regards to what about the most challenging students, we do try to, and we do provide formal training for our mentors, and some of it is around how do you handle those situations. For example, when you're talking with an 8th grader about careers and you ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say, oh, I want to be a drug dealer. What's your response to that? So we do provide mentors with training to diffuse some of those challenging situations. And then there are also other supports through the schools, through MyCom, that are helpful for us.
In the way back, then we'll come to Bridge. We've just got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to also encourage us as the conversation goes to shift a little bit, and I'd love to, in some ways, hear your and everyone's recommendations for what the schools could be doing differently. We've talked a lot about what you could be doing differently, but it'd be good to also hear what you think the schools should be doing differently to maximize your effectiveness of the work you're trying to do. Yes, ma'am.
Cleveland was fortunate to receive $2.3 million in a physical education progress grant. And being in Cleveland, I was so excited. So I went to our South Euclid-Hurst department and now you are a partner there. And she wanted to know, does it really work? It really does work. We have Mr. Benjamin that's in our city planning department, and he gets out there and he motivates the children. And I have children in the school, and it really does work. And I wanted to personally thank you, because it was in Cleveland and we did bring it to South Euclid. So thank you.
Nice, thank you. Very nice. Thank you. Bridge, did you?
Yeah, and you want to keep going to the community?
There were no other hands yet that I got, so you're up.
Okay, so you kind of teed up the question I was interested in, is building on what Dr. Comer has said about looking at this almost from an engineering problem. What are the institutional changes that are being made and schools could make? And first, Jillian, I was just interested very quickly, how did the collective bargaining arrangement with Eric and Cleveland come about? For those districts that don't have a catalytic event of a school shooting, are there other districts across the country that are making similar arrangements? And third, the Council of Great City Schools, or AFT, or how do we as a commission spread the good word about the priority you've given this? And then just quickly, Stephanie, it seems to me City Year came into this, roaring into the schools and said, we're not going to go anywhere unless there's an early warning system where we can have a complete effect on attendance, behavior, and course performance in reading and math, but at least we'll know the correlation between our interventions and supports and some tangible outcomes that are highly predictive of high school graduation rates and beyond. And I was just interested in any of the panelists' wishes and desires for the institutional changes you'd like to see in the schools that would, get the business community even more directly involved in the development and success of children.
Sure. So our collective bargaining agreement changes that reflect the SEL initiatives came about in 2013. And I say that because that's not where we started. So we started this work in 2008, and it was a good 4 or 5 years in before we were ready, I think, as an organization to say that this is what we do in each and every school, and to put it and to memorialize it and to negotiate it into a contract where it's not going to go away very easily. And so we had a lot of lessons we learned between 2008 and 2013 with implementing student support teams, with implementing paths, with implementing our planning centers. And we were able to say, like, what is it that needs to be in language, i.e. how much training do teachers get? Do our student support teams, we shifted them to meeting once a week and providing time and schedules to make sure those meetings happen, to have teachers, administrators, and mental health experts talking each week about our highest risk students and interventions that those kids needs, and how can we make sure those are happening in every school. But typically within that negotiation, there's a lot of challenges. But when we sat down to write the language about SEL, it was probably the easiest article to write in the entire contract, because we were so connected as a district and union on what we were doing. So the language, while we had to go about, should it be 2 days or 3 days of training? Should it be, how do we do this? The question was never, does it belong here or not? The question was, what specifics belong within the contract? And so we did, and we actually put it within the article of student discipline, but we renamed it and we headed it with social emotional learning and student discipline. So we wanted to signal to the organization this shift from strictly, these are the offenses that are suspendable, these are the we wanted to show this shift that, and it is reflected from this morning, that if we're going to shift from a suspension or punitive model, what is in that gap? What are we providing to make sure behaviors and that we are giving kids the tools they need to be successful, and that we're giving the educators with those kids what they need to impact the kids, and so that we're in a different setting. And so that was instituted in our contract in 2013, and we just negotiated another contract to continue that language and added a few tweaks in there. But we're proud of that. We're proud that regardless if myself, if David Quilke, if Eric Gordon are here or not, this work will go on.
So to John's question about we're part of a research project that looks at the effects of a collaborative network. on a number of schools. And it's there are 60 schools. It's a randomized control study. It was funded by the Department of Education. It's an I3 grant. And we partnered with communities and schools, Johns Hopkins University and their city year, and then of course our partner principals. And we are looking at the effects of the partners working in a very specific way, very specific goals to eradicate risk indicators from those schools, the early warning indicators that my colleague from City Year, the core member, referenced earlier. It's been surprising. The study group has been able to tease out the effects of the different partners on different strategies. And I would expect, it was a complex project, but I would expect, based on what we learn from about which strategies are more prevalent in those schools and how are they related to the metrics that they were supposed to move, that we'll better understand. We plan to move forward with the collaboration after the study, and then we'll better understand which strategies to focus on. But it's been, a lot of what we found is that it does take a collaboration that is holding itself accountable to very specific goals in order for our schools to have outperformed our control schools. And that kind of collaboration, to Mr. Bentez's question, required really deep coordination at the executive director level in these cities and at the schoolhouse level among the practitioners, and resources had to go into both levels.
Shana, you wanna?
So I think the question you're asking is, if you could change one thing about your partnership, what would you change? Is that the question? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think for us, the challenge is sometimes communication. We talked earlier about language. Sometimes you have educators who have a very specific language, and you have business people who have a very specific language, and it ends up sounding like the Tower of Babel. No one is sure what the other is saying. I will say, I think that there's been great progress in terms of different sectors and stakeholders of the community communicating, again, through our Cleveland Plan work. I think for GCP as an organization, we have excellent communication sort of at the top level. That tends to be the way that our organization works. We communicate CEO to CEO. So our work usually starts at the overall district level and then moves down to the school level. Sometimes as we move down to the school level, the message, I don't want to say it has been lost, but it's different. Different parties have different expectations. So for us, and this is on our part also as the business community, what would be really helpful for us would be clearer lines, more understandable lines of communication so that we're all working together on the ground.
Nice. Kasey?
Well, I would say that this year has been a very good year for us. And what I would probably change would simply be, well, let me say this. For the first time, our principals, to Shana's point, meet once a month. And this year, we were actually, about 2 weeks ago, we got to present and bring all of our lead agencies to that meeting, which was a first, so that the language that we were sharing got right to the principals. And then 2 weeks later, we went and spoke to the Planning Center interventionists as well with the exact same presentation. So now, not only is it at the superintendent's and the academic superintendent level, we've now spoken to the principals so they understand, and they were very excited about what the network looks like. And then we spoke to the PCIAs who deal directly with some of our more challenging students so they know where the resources are. So I think the communication barriers we are definitely breaking down, and I think the only thing that I would like to see change is a little more access for our community to get into the schools, because sometimes it is because they have such a rigorous schedule with testing and this, that, and the third, some of the things that we could bring in we're not able to do. So I think the communication, we're really doing wonderfully with that by getting access to each level. I think now it's going to be getting the services within the confines of the school day so that it's still kind of like a circular process. We see them during the day. We also know that they're available after school, and so that it's a continuum of services.
So before we, was there, yes, go ahead, yeah.
So my question is more for Shana and Kasey, but all of you can feel free to respond. It's specifically focused on what role, if any, does youth voice play in the programming development and implementation that you all provide in your respective areas, right? I'm hearing about MyCom, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm already thinking about ways that we can definitely connect and potentially try to replicate this back at home in Baltimore, right? So I'm curious as to whether or not there is a space, right, to take input from youth.
Sustained, meaning not just one-shot deal. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, as I stated earlier, they are a part of all of our committees across the board. So because some of them do meet during the day, and so we can't ask the young people to miss a lot of school, but whether it be marketing, communication, program development, where we're going to go, what tchotchkes are we going to give away at this event, we make sure that there's a young person at the table. Now, sometimes it's not possible for us to have them during the day at meetings, so what we do is with our youth councils, we give the information to our neighborhood MyCom youth coordinators. And it is their responsibility to get that feedback from their youth councils or from their youth program and get that back to us before we move forward. And as I stated before, we put something in place in November, and we have not rolled it out because we have not had the amount of young people to be able to attend. So for even if it does mean that it holds up some of the work that we need to do, when there are critical changes, we make sure, so for example, we wanted, because our network is so large, we felt we needed more than 50 young people. Sometimes getting 50 young people to coordinate a schedule is very difficult. We tried in February, and it was a snow day, and we tried again early April, and it was conflicting with some testing. So my call today was, hey, we've got 56, we're gonna do this on Thursday, period. And so now we will be able to move forward, because critical changes, we will not move them forward if we do not have a strong youth input, because at the end of the day, the work that we're doing is for them, therefore it should be driven by them.
So for us, just as it's important to have teacher and administrator buy-in for our initiatives, it's also important to have student buy-in. If the students aren't interested, there's no purpose for our business members to be there. So we try to incorporate student voice when we can. Two examples that I would give. One initiative that we're working on that is a bit larger than the Cleveland Metropolitan School District is something called GCP Internship Central, where we are creating a database of internship opportunities, best practices, feedback, both from students and from employers, all in the effort to get more of our students employed in internships over the summer and during the school year. So we have a huge event every February called the Internship Summit. We have students there, they participate in panels, they give us feedback about what would make this a more valuable offering for them. Another example is an initiative we're working on with CMSD called the Academies of Cleveland, where 5 of the CMSD high schools have joined together in an academy model, and those schools now have career pathways that are linked to in-demand industries in our region. So each school has a group of student ambassadors, and GCP has played a part in that framework and also working with the ambassadors. My colleague had the unique opportunity to travel with them on a bus to Nashville, so we're very hands-on with the students and getting that student voice.
Nice, nice. So we have 2 minutes left, and we're going to try to finish on time. One of my favorite closure exercises that we see in some of our curricula is to ask each of you, in this case each of you, to just close with a word that captures how you're feeling, having met this group, how you're feeling about where we are and maybe where we're headed.
I'm going to say drive.
Drive. Thank you.
Collaboration.
Oh, I'm feeling enthusiasm.
Motion.
Motion. All right. Cheers for the panel. That's it for the